Okay, so we just saw how to use uelog, and we also saw how to format the string using format specifiers and passing in values for the format specifiers. And specifically, we used %d, which is the format specifier for an integer. We can also use format specifiers for other data types as well. So I'm going to create a few different local variables of different types. For example, I'd like to make a float, and I'm going to call this my float. And I'm going to use braced initialization to give this a value of 3.14159, and I'm going to use the f because otherwise it would by default be a double. And if I don't include the f, then a double literal value would cause a narrowing conversion, and since I'm using braced initialization, that would cause an error. So we can log this to the output log using a formatted string. So I'll go ahead and paste this call to uelog, and instead of int my int, I'm going to replace the text in the string to say float my float, and the format specifier for a float is %f. And now this has to be a float value, so I'm going to use my float. So let's go ahead and compile this, and hopping back in the editor and hitting play, you'll see that we're now printing the int and the float to the output log. So far, so good. Let's create a few more variables. I'm going to create a double called myDouble, and I'm going to initialize this to some value. I'm also going to create a char called myChar and initialize this to some character. And remember, for a char, you need single quotes. Now, I can also create a wide character. wchar_t is the type for a wide character, and I'm going to call this wide char. And to initialize this, we need to pass in a wide character literal, and that is prefixed with a capital L. So we have L and then single quotes, and we have our character. So prefixing the character with an L provides a wide character of this type. And then finally, I'm going to create a Boolean called myBool. And I'm going to initialize this to true. Now let's see how we can log all of these to the screen. So I'm going to copy this uelog call, and I'm going to paste it under this declaration for myDouble, and I'm going to replace the text so that it says double myDouble, and the format specifier for this is going to be %lf, and we're going to use myDouble for the value. Next, I'm going to go ahead and log myChar, and I'm going to get this text to say char myChar, and the format specifier for a char is %c. So we're going to use myChar for that one. Next, we'll use the wide character. So we'll replace this text with wchar_t wide char. And the format specifier for a wide char is %lc. And we're going to use wide char for the value there. And finally, we'll use uelog to print the value of myBool. So I'm going to replace the text to say bool myBool, and there isn't a format specifier for a bool, but we can use the format specifier for an integer, which is %d, and that's because booleans are readily convertible to integer types. So I'm going to use myBool for the value there, and we'll get the integer equivalent of the boolean, which is 0 or 1. Let's go ahead and compile this. Okay, we've compiled. Now hopping back in the editor and hitting play, you'll see that we've printed my int with a value of 42. We've printed my float, which is a value of roughly pi to a few digits. We have the value of myDouble. We have the value of myChar. We even have the wide character. And then finally, we have myBool, which we initialized to true, which is why we get a 1. If we had initialized it to false, we would get a 0. So that shows how to log to the output log a formatted string with various different data types. And as a final example, we're going to go ahead and print one last log. And we're going to print the values to several of these. So we can say int and use %d. We can say float and use %f. And let's say bool and use %d, which is the integer specifier. And since we're using multiple format specifiers in our formatted string, we need to provide a value for each of them. And they have to be in order, meaning since we use integer, then float, then integer, then we have to provide an integer, then a float, then an integer. They have to be in the correct order. So for the integer, let's provide myInt first. For the float, let's provide myFloat. And for the bool, we'll provide myBool. So we can compile this. And hopping back in the editor and pressing play, we'll see that the final line provides the values for the int, the float, and the bool converted to an integer. So this shows that we can have any number of parameters in the UE log. We just have to make sure that for each format specifier we provide, we then have to provide that value as an argument. Now these don't have to be variables, they can also be literal values. For example, instead of myBool, I can just pass in false here. And if I go ahead and compile this, we'll see that pressing play gives me the correct value that I passed in. Since I passed in false, we get a 0. So this concludes this video. Now we know how to log information to the output log, even when we have variables and values that we wish to include in our string. All we have to do is format the string using the correct format specifiers, and we will get a string printed to the output log containing those values.